talk about three main topics today, but before we get into that, I want to let Nigel introduce himself and explain a little bit about his background.
Thanks, Tim. Nigel Sampson. I've been in IT and security for about 30 years now. The last 14 years building cybersecurity programs and developing compliance programs for multiple verticals: healthcare, financial services, oil and gas industry, transportation, from various sizes of businesses, from 80 employees up to 5,000 employees. And I've managed teams from 1 to 21. And my focus now is really into still building cybersecurity programs, focusing more on current technologies such as SASE, incident response, and ransomware, and preventing it.
Yeah, and I think that's what we kind of boiled it down to, those three topics when we were talking about, given the different industries you've been in, different sizes of companies, these are things that are kind of common threads and things that are general to the cybersecurity world, regardless of maybe where you might fit in there. So I think to get into that, the first one you mentioned of the SASE, could you kind of explain what Secure Access Service Edge is and kind of how you would describe it in layman's terms?
The SASE, Secure Access Service Edge, is a secure way to connect employees from wherever they are in the globe to the internet and to the applications in a secure way. It also provides a way for businesses to govern employees' use of applications and also of the internet and what websites they go to. It's critical because it provides a way for businesses to control how they access the internet for business purposes, although sometimes companies will allow users to use the internet for personal use, use business assets for personal use. People are going to do it anyway, so you're not always going to be able to block them. But this is a great way to allow businesses to govern that level of access and to protect employees from suspicious websites and from using insecure applications.
And I imagine this has changed a lot with the emergence of hybrid work and remote work. What's the impact of that?
The shift to hybrid work in cloud environments has fundamentally transformed how Secure Access Service Edge enables organizations to approach secure connectivity. It represents a significant architectural shift from traditional network security models using VPNs, VDI, and so on, by combining network and security functions into a cloud delivery service. It's changing organizational approaches to identity-based access rather than location-based security. Prioritizes user identity as a primary security boundary, not physical location or network perimeters. This enables consistent security regardless of where employees work. Zero trust implementation at scale. SASE frameworks naturally align with zero trust principles through continuous verification, least privileged access, microsegmentation across distributed environments, edge computing optimization. By moving security and networking services closer to users at the edge, SASE reduces latency while maintaining security controls when accessing cloud resources. It also simplifies management through consolidations. Organizations are reducing their technology stack by integrating previously siloed security tools like CASB, secure web gateway, zero trust network access, firewall as a service, into a unified SASE platform.
And I suppose there's the obvious kind of security objectives there, but have you seen feedback or had conversations with people about just the productivity from an employee standpoint using this as well?
Yeah, I mean, SASE will provide you with some agility, cost efficiency. It'll improve employee productivity because people aren't going to be say, every time they want to log in, they're going to have to start up a VPN, put in credentials and such. If we just look at business agility, it enables rapid scaling, adaptation to changing business conditions by allowing quick provision of secure connectivity in new locations. So in an M&A environment, you acquire a new company, you can stand up SASE straight to that acquired company very quickly, more so than you could do with VPN. From a cost efficiency standpoint, it reduces the hardware footprint by shifting from multiple point solutions, obviously like point-to-point VPNs, to consolidated cloud services. Lowers the operational overhead because you're not managing multiple firewalls into unified management interfaces and automated policy deployments. It decreases the reliance on expensive MPLS circuits, dedicated VPN infrastructure, like I just mentioned, the point-to-point VPNs. And it also optimizes IT staff utilization by reducing the time that they're spending on routine maintenance and troubleshooting those point-to-point VPNs. And it shifts the spending from large CapEx to predictable OpEx costs. There's also from specifically the employee productivity, the application performance by intelligently routing traffic and reducing latency. With VPNs, you have to look at each individual point to point to troubleshoot the issue. With a SASE solution, there's only one solution you're really troubleshooting. There might be regional latency issues, but it's a lot more efficient to troubleshoot a SASE solution than it is to troubleshoot a global point-to-point VPN network. It creates a consistent user experience as well, regardless of the location. It reduces the friction in accessing necessary resources, enabling employees to work effectively from anywhere. And the risk reduction is also part of a SASE solution. So it provides that holistic visibility into network traffic, user behavior, application usage across all environments, especially when it comes to AI solutions and people using AI products. You can identify what the products are and how much data is actually flowing through them and whether they're actually approved by the business. It applies a consistent security policies to reduce security gaps between different access methods as well, and decreases the attack surface overall. You can also provide rapid threat response by centralizing your security management and intelligence.
And I think we talked about this before jumping on, but the AI component of who's using what and what platforms are being used and what information is going to those platforms has definitely become more prominent. But that's probably a topic that could be its own interview. So I don't want to dig too much into that because I think there's a lot there. You did talk about the VPN stuff and kind of the switch from VPN to SASE. Is there a lot of reluctance from people in the C-suite level to do that just because VPN has been the way that people are used to that? They feel secure. What's kind of a common misconception in making that switch that you see?
Yeah, there's several misconceptions that persist at the C-level suite about SASE implementation. Sometimes they think it's just about rebranding of existing technologies. They think it's marketing hype rather than architectural transformation. While SASE incorporates existing technologies, its value comes from the integration and cloud delivery model that fundamentally changes security and network architecture. It is primarily an IT infrastructure decision. The C-levels are often categorizing SASE as a technical implementation rather than a business enabler. It misses how SASE directly impacts business capabilities, employee experience, and organizational agility, but also from the risk management standpoint and the reduction of that attack surface. But the complete transition can happen quickly. When I say quickly, I deployed a SASE solution to a business that was, they had 7 business units and they were in 65 countries covering 5,000 employees. And it took about 8 months in a staged, phased deployment. So that's relatively quick for a global business. It's also about cost reduction. So in that instance, the goal was to remove most of the 45 firewalls that were deployed throughout the company. Um, Effectively, that's $100,000 a year in maintenance costs alone. So that's an instant savings. That would take time. That would probably take another 12 months. But there are cost savings to be had. And then it's just a matter of um, how long is it going to take to phase those out? And so you could say if that was the goal, it would take a period of time, but still the cost savings are there, and it's a matter of how quickly you want to make those cost savings effective.
Gotcha. And I do want to apologize. I have a light here that's motion censored, so I guess I wasn't moving enough.
No
So sorry
worries.
to distract you there, Nigel, or anyone watching. But and I want to transition a little bit to that second topic, which I think now is a good time to do because obviously, preventative measures and that sounds great and everything, but I think what everyone is so worried about is if something does happen, and we hear about it all the time. Seems like every week there's a new company coming out in the news that something's happened. So getting into kind of that incident response, you know, what should companies do to prepare for that? Is it just accept that it's inevitable and how they, have a plan in place? What advice would you give?
So yeah, even if you have a SASE implementation, you still need an incident response plan. Um, and the foundation of that, if you do have a SASE, is to integrate your SASE telemetry into the detection capabilities, leverage the unified visibility of the SASE that it provides across users, devices, applications, and just establish the normal behavioral baselines to identify any anomalies. I would configure the alert specifically for SASE protected environments, and configure it so that you can identify access patterns. Um, you can also create cross-functional response teams, include networking experts alongside the security personnel, ensure cloud operations teams participate in response planning. That might include tabletop testing, establish clear roles for identity management specialists if you do have them, and develop the SASE specific playbooks. So they will be different to, say, a legacy environment like a VPN point-to-point network. Document the procedures for isolating compromised users without disrupting entire networks. Create processes for rapidly adjusting access policies during active incidents, and establish protocols for containment across distributed environments. From the operational considerations, practice dynamic policy enforcement. So sometimes you're going to have to apply policies on the fly. You need to understand what the impacts are when you do real-time policy adjustments. Document the procedures for implementing emergency access restrictions. Sometimes when you do have to prevent access, you need to know what the impact is. Train teams on targeted isolation techniques rather than just broad network shutdowns. I was involved in an incident where they did shut down a global network because they really they didn't understand the scope, so they just shut everything down. It wasn't a significant impact to the business. However, it's not something that you want to do, when you're, depending on what market you're in, because some companies, let's say hospitality companies, you don't want to shut down a whole hotel system if it's only affecting the accounting department. So it's very important that you target the isolation based on the scope of the incident. Um, Maintain your backup access paths. Develop contingency access methods if SASE infrastructure is compromised. And that is, obviously a possibility that could happen. Document emergency procedures for critical application access when standard channels fail, and consider out-of-band management capabilities for critical infrastructure. Sometimes when your environment is compromised, you can't use that environment, especially for communications. You have to have an out-of-band communications for crisis management communication, and address distributed evidence collection. So even though you're handling an incident, it's important that you have procedures for gathering forensic data. You want to have the logs. You want to make sure that any access data is preserved so that you can identify where the threat actors have been, where they're going, uh, and what they were doing. And you can only do that if you preserve the log data. And from a communication and recovery standpoint, I think we talked a little bit about the communication channels, making sure that you have out-of-band communication channels, but plan for a staged recovery, develop methodologies for progressive restoration of access, because that's going to start fairly quickly. Create processes for validating secure posture before restoring connection. So you don't want to just, if you think you've sanitized the environment, just start restoring things. You have to be very certain that you've got the threat actor out of your environment and establish verification procedures before removing those emergency restrictions. And the last thing is document lessons learned processes. Create frameworks for reviewing incident data from SASE components and other components, even from your VPN environments, if that's what you're using, or MPLS environments. Establish procedures for translating incidents into policy improvements, and develop metrics to evaluate response effectiveness, specifically in distributed environments. So by approaching incident response with these considerations, you can maintain your business continuity while effectively addressing security incidents, even in complex hybrid and cloud environments protected by architectures such as SASE or VPN point-to-point networks.
So it sounds like, I mean, you touched on it a lot, but if if an incident does happen, it's affecting almost every level of the business, right? Communication, it could halt, whole areas of business for a time. So should people be thinking of this, or executives be thinking of this as not just an IT function, but kind of a business continuity issue?
Yeah, it's they have to have a strategic perspective. Um, Recognize incidents as business events, not technical events. Security breaches impact revenue, reputation, customer trust, and operational capabilities. So it's an impact to the business as a whole. And the response effectiveness determines the business impact more than the initial breach. So the speed and quality of leadership decisions during incidents directly affects the financial outcomes. Integrating response planning into risk governance, that includes cyber incidents and enterprise risk management frameworks alongside the financial, operational, and market risks. Evaluate cyber response capabilities as a business resilience metric reportable to the board so that they understand the level of business resiliency, and then allocate response resources based on a business impact analysis rather than IT priorities alone. And a business impact analysis is something that can be done at any time and normally requires a specific resource. So whether you hire somebody or you allocate somebody, if you have a risk department, to conduct a business impact analysis, because it requires going to department heads, identifying impacts of the loss of maybe a critical application or critical infrastructure, and then they determine how long that application can be down for and what's the impact to the business. How critical is that to the business? And that's when you start realizing what the cost is. And when there's a financial impact, or even if it's an operational impact, ultimately it's going to be a financial impact. Uh, what is that impact in dollars to the business? So establishing executive level incident roles is key and is very important. And you should normally have either a CIO or COO as part of the incident response team.
In what, so if, an incident occurs, if you're at that level, the CIO level, even CEO, obviously it's all hands on deck, scary, everyone's kind of panicking. What should the first 24 hours look like?
So you can break it down. The first 2 hours is going to be an initial assessment and activation of your incident response plan. Uh, Depending on, and there's going to be different tiers of types of incidents. They're not all the same. Sometimes it would be just notifying the CIO. It could be a CISO. Um, it may even be general counsel. But if it's a severe enough impact, it will actually involve the CEO. And it's normally just initial notification with a severity assessment. Um, you may have to activate, if there is one, an executive crisis team. But normally it's those folks, and if you have a chief communication officer, that person as well, just giving them a heads up that you're activating the incident response plan. And then you get beyond that into a strategic response direction, and that's normally in the first 6 hours. And that's really just kind of getting the team together and trying to figure out exactly what's going on, pulling in a bit more detail. Then after that, probably 6 to 12 hours, you're talking about stabilization and communication. So you've got to review and approve any external communication strategy, make critical business continuity decisions. Are you going to actually start restoring data, determine customer notification approach? If you have marketing, if you have an external PR team, that's where they would come in. I've actually been involved in instances where you would actually engage with a PR team, and then they would actually give you or provide a strategy of how you're going to communicate externally. And then you establish a rhythm of executive briefings. I've done it where, as an incident commander, I do it daily, for at least for the first 2 weeks. Once the key stakeholders are in place and plans are set in motion, that might get reduced to either once every other day or once a week, depending on the severity and depending on the amount of stakeholders, and stakeholders might change as well. And then beyond that, you're into the extended response planning, reviewing update technical and business impact assessments. You'd approve medium-term response strategy and resource needs, make decisions on business adjustments, and finalize initial external stakeholder communications. And then with the critical success factors, towards the end of the incident, you look at making timely decisions with incomplete information. Right? That's the decision velocity, the unity of messaging, ensuring consistent communication across all channels, making sure everything's documented, recording when key decisions were made and what their rationale was, the appropriate visibility, balancing hands-on leadership with avoiding interference in technical responses, and then making sure that stakeholder focus, prioritizing customers, employee, regulatory needs alongside the technical remediation. So the frameworks there to ensure executives focus on business impact and management, while the technical teams handle the incident containment and remediation. It creates a clear role separation while maintaining an effective coordination of the teams and internal stakeholders. And you can learn a lot through doing those types of root cause analysis and determining what those critical success factors are.
And this questions might be a little, before I get to my next question, just as you were talking there, obviously the PR teams and all that, communicating to users what had happened and how you want to kind of communicate that with them. As a user, we're all users of different banks and different, whatever we're a part of.
Mhm.
is it right to judge somebody because they had an incident, or should we just be kind of under the assumption that, these companies are all essentially under attack all the time and it could happen anywhere? Or, are we right to judge, I guess, as users, or how should we see that?
So pretty much every company's gone through some kind of security incident or a breach. I've been hired twice in the last 5 years at companies that either had a breach. I actually joined a company in the middle of a breach,
Wow.
and that was their second one in I think it was a year. So you can't really judge a company um, based off of security incidents. And if you look at publicly traded companies like security companies, Okta had an incident and their share price dropped 9%, but it then recovered within 6 months. The CrowdStrike incident wasn't really a breach, but it was impactful. Um, Again, their stock price dropped about 10% and regained it within 3 months. But companies that do have breaches, it's an indication of a lack of security hygiene and maybe a lack of attention to the technologies that they have in place that are there to limit the risk and prevent those threats from happening. So it's obviously a sign that there's something missing, whether it's leadership, whether it's technology, whether it's security hygiene, patching, that kind of thing. So it's just a highlight of a gap. And a lot of companies have a lot of gaps. And that's why we keep seeing uh, breaches happening. And they happen at a rate of about 11 a day. That's according to numbers from last year. So, and it's only going to go up with the advent of AI technology.
Yeah, and I guess that brings me to kind of the next point of ransomware and how that's evolved. You know, what's the latest? What are the most sophisticated trends you're kind of seeing in ransomware lately?
Uh, Extortion tactics. I've actually been involved with a Lockbit 3.0 incident. That's a double extortion. There's triple and quadruple extortion. Basically, it's where it goes beyond just encryption. It's stealing sensitive data before encryption and then threatening public release. And then they'll contact customers directly, and sometimes they have threatened people personally, which is it's rare, but it's happened. Um, and launching DDoS attacks against the victims simultaneously in order to force payment. Um, a lot of those are occurring right now. And how these ransomware threat actors um, once they get in through what's called access brokers on the dark web. And then once they get in, the smart ones will do what's called living off the land techniques. So basically, they minimize the malware footprints by leveraging legitimate systems. Like they'll use PowerShell, which comes from Microsoft, WMI, to evade detection. But it makes the attribution and detection significantly more difficult as the activity kind of blends in with the normal operation. So it's very hard to find. Um, and with supply chain compromise proliferation, that's uh, a much bigger concern for companies now because that's a way into the main target. Um, you could look at Change Healthcare. Large healthcare companies and carriers are very concerned with supply chain because um, they see them as a backdoor into their own environments because sometimes they have integrated networks or they share credentials. And it's the easiest way for a threat actor um, to get into those environments. I think SolarWinds and Kaseya instance demonstrated that approach and its effectiveness.
And could you walk us through kind of what the ideal situation would be from detection to recovery? Like once that ransomware is identified, kind of how that works, and in an ideal situation in a perfect world, how that would be kind of handled.
Yeah, I mean the critical success factors for that. would be speed with strategic patience. Rapid containment is essential, but you can't rush your decisions because that can worsen the impact. Um, the best responses would balance urgent containment with measured recovery planning. Um, and while technical teams can handle tactical response, business leaders drive the strategic decisions based on the organizational priorities and impact assessments. It's key that you make those decisions not in a rushed way, but in a very considerate way. Having parallel work streams is important as well. It's important to be able to um, have effective responses operate multiple simultaneous tracks. So technical investigations, doing a business impact assessment, communication management and recovery planning all requires like almost a project management methodology. I actually, in one incident, brought in a project manager because we had to rebuild a product. Unfortunately, it was a subsidiary, and the IT folks of the subsidiary did not have any backups. Well, I'd say they didn't have any backups. The backups were encrypted because they weren't segmented. So we basically had to build the products from a database that we found that wasn't encrypted. And that required a project manager to be able to pull those teams together, rebuild those teams, rebuild those products, and then at the same time implement the security tech stack that we had to put in place. So there's a lot of coordination between teams that has to go into play. So parallel work streams is key there. Other critical success factors, the evidence preservation from the start. You want to be able to preserve that forensic data because not just from a regulatory standpoint, but there's potential legal action that can be taken because if they find the perpetrators, you'll need that evidence in order to prove the case. Um, I haven't come across any incidents where they've actually caught the perpetrators because
I was
mostly
gonna say, does that ever happen? Or
they're in Eastern Europe, they're, Russia, China, you're not going to really find them. But in the rare cases that you do, you still want to provide that data, but you also want it from a identification of how did they get in? What did they do? You want that data because it tells a story and you want to make sure it doesn't happen again. So it's like putting a puzzle together. It creates that image of how they got in, where they got in, what they did, and then how you can prevent that from happening again. And we talked about the comprehensive communication strategy. Um, you need to know who you're going to talk to, when, what you're going to say, and involve any third parties like marketing or uh, PR firms that will help you with that. Um, Pre-establishing decision frameworks, uh, having an established criteria for critical decisions. Are you going to pay the ransom or not? It removes that emotional decision making during the crisis, so you're not put on the spot and aren't you going to pay it? The interesting thing about threat actors is they're not stupid. They know that most companies have a $5 million cybersecurity insurance policy. They're going to go for something close to that because it means that the company is not out of pocket. They're just going to affect their cybersecurity insurance policy, and their likelihood of getting paid is much higher if they don't go overboard. Um, and continuous improvement loop. So the response doesn't end with recovery. A thorough post-incident analysis and implementation of lessons learned helps prevent future incidents.
And if I guess last question for you, just to wrap up this portion of it, is if you had to give one piece of advice, so either CEO or board or anything like that, of kind of ransomware readiness, what would that piece of advice be?
Um, I would say make sure that you have a cybersecurity program that's documented, that you have a business impact analysis created. You could start with a risk assessment, which is quite, I'd say, easy, but there's plenty of companies that will do it. And that gives you an idea of basically where your gaps are, where your weaknesses are, and gives you areas to where you can focus. Um, Ensuring that you have business continuity in place and disaster recovery documented, um, and making sure that you have redundant operational capacity, right? So um, I know when I've gone through incidents, it takes a third of my team because I've normally had small teams, and most companies only have small cyber teams. But during an incident, they're the ones that have to focus on remediation, getting rid of the threat, and then getting the business back to where it should be. Um, and it's that kind of strategy and philosophy comes from the top. So C levels, C-level executives should understand the risk that there's going to be a financial impact if they have a cyber incident, that it can have dire consequences for your business. If you're a small business, less than 500 users, maybe it's 3,500 million a year. If you have a security incident, it could actually destroy your company. It will not only stop you from what you're doing, and if you're like in healthcare benefits administration, where you produce credit cards and your credit card environment goes down, that's going to be significant impact to your reputation and your revenue. So uh, pay attention to your cyber budget. Don't make it a part of your IT budget. Make cybersecurity a separate function within the business. It's not a function of IT. It's its own risk-based function within the business, and it requires investment. Uh, most companies have potentially, like I'd say, 20 to 30 cybersecurity tools in place. And it's a lot, and it keeps growing. But the thing is that the threat landscape grows. There's more threat actors. The threat actors have AI tools that they're using. Um, it's not getting better, it's getting worse. And with companies now struggling to hire people, not necessarily because um, there's a shortage, but because of AI is now clogging up the hiring process for a lot of businesses, just making it harder for companies to find uh, talented, skilled, experienced security professionals that can help them with some of these things. So um, I would probably pay attention to that and look at hiring companies like MCS that look for cybersecurity professionals like myself that can make that connection. Um, so I think yeah, it's difficult in this environment, especially with the macroeconomic issues that a lot of companies are facing. But cybersecurity is not going away. It's just like accounting. It's just like HR. It's not going away. It has to be um, fortified, and you need investment to do that.
Yeah, and I think it's only going to be ramped up, right? Like you said, with as things become more and more sophisticated with AI and this type of stuff, it's just going to be ramped up. And yeah, and I think it on the hiring front, it's been tough. We talk about it all the time, but we have AI agents applying for people, and we have AI agents looking at applications. So uh, you know, getting to the actual person behind some of that data and some of those resumes is a challenge that I think is kind of working itself out right now. It's been tough.
Yeah, it's its own risk environment. So there's already been cases of companies hiring security professionals, and it's what's called a deep fake, where even in the interviews, the threat actors are faking their appearance, and they actually a security company hired I think a security analyst, a security ops analyst, who was based in North Korea. Uh, the only reason they found out that he was a fake candidate was because when he started, within a few weeks, he was asking for a lot of equipment. And then they started realizing he was sending data to China and some of the activity. And I think that he actually even loaded malware onto his workstation. And that basically, raised a red flag. So it does happen. It's happening now. And with these kinds of issues, it just adds to the threat level that most companies are facing and their risk environments. The risk environments are not just technical anymore. It's, are you hiring the right people? Are they threat actors? Are they going to be insider threats? Are they going to be able to build your cyber program effectively? Do they have the right experience to identify gaps? Can they do a risk assessment or a risk analysis, providing you with where your weaknesses are? Um, I've deployed things like cloud security posture management platforms that have highlighted whole cloud environments which are just full of critical risk because the CTO had no visibility, and there was no secure SDLC in place by the developers that were in a third party. The third party did not have responsibility in that AWS environment for security. They were just there to maintain a product. So until I put in a CSPM solution, nobody had any idea of how weak security was within the product's environment, and it opened itself up to being exploited. So you need experienced people to be able to do that, highlight those risks, and a lot of the time it's hidden risk. So unless you invest in either technologies or the people, that you could be accepting risks that you don't even know about.
And I think I'm a little biased, but I would always say it's the people. Hire more people.
Yeah,
Right?
yeah.
But Nigel, thank you very much. This has been great. I really appreciate your time. Any way people can reach you if they have further questions, want to reach out?
Sure. Email me at ntsampson@gmail.com. It'd be the easiest way to reach me.
Awesome. And I believe LinkedIn as well, right? So
LinkedIn, yeah, feel free to reach out and connect through LinkedIn. Yeah.
awesome. Well, I appreciate your time, and I hope everyone got a lot out of this. I know I did. So thank you very much.